Hello, everyone. So recently I went to a conference and I saw a lot of great presentations, but I saw this presentation where the presenter, who was very charismatic, was presenting like this. And I thought it was a joke at first. I thought it was ironic or something like that. But he presented with a white background and lots of text and lots of slides that looked like this. And it never got any better than that. And it reminded me of, this is not the actual person. I don't want to embarrass anyone, but I just used AI to generate essentially what it looked like. So, I talked about in the presentation Zen books, over 2 decades ago now, the first one. And I mentioned the cognitive load theory by John Sweller, and this isn't just a quote from actually one of the newspaper articles at the time, where he says that it's effective to speak to a diagram, any kind of visual, because it presents information in a different form, but it's not effective to speak the same words that are written because it is putting too much load on the mind and decreases your ability to understand what is being presented. So it's okay to have any kind of visual, quantitative display, any kind of charts, photographs, maps, anything like that, with a minimal amount of text. And then visually we can process that while listening to the narration of the presenter. But if you have a whole bunch of text on the screen, whether it's exactly what the person is saying or even additional sentences, that's just too much to take in. Now, in Kamishibai, which is a Japanese art form that's been around for a few hundred years, of course, it's a storyteller and it's a visuals. There could be some kanji, there's some letters with it, but mostly it's full frame visuals of myriad kinds that go along in harmony with the narration, and the audience is really engaged with that. So how ridiculous would it be if we did something like this, where the presenter, the storyteller, just put a bunch of text there? And of course, that would not be engaging at all. So I want to show you an example. This is an example that I sometimes use with students. It's just a very short thing. This is a chart that Steve Jobs used in his iPhone, the introduction of the iPhone presentation. A lot of people might do something like this. So this is the presentation that he did. And I want to show you that right now. So if you remember, because this presentation is often talked about, it's about 80 minutes long, and I'm just going to take this one 70-second section from there. Of course, there are many sections in the actual presentation, but we'll just focus on this one that's 70 seconds long. So what Steve did here is he's sort of introducing the category, which is the smartphone, and his main point is that there are smartphones right now. They're not so smart, and they're not easy to use. And of course, Apple is going to find that sweet spot that's going to be easy to use, and it's going to be a smartphone, which is not big news now, but this is a long time ago. And at the time, it was a big deal.
Let me talk about a category of things.
So Steve Jobs starts out with just saying, okay, we're transitioning to this new section. Let me tell you about this category of things called smartphone, which most people didn't have at that time, of course. And it's really 3 slides, but in a sense, 9 slides, because there's an animation that comes in. They change. So the smartphone, well, what is a smartphone? So he explains that, it's the phone, which we all have, right? The kind of, the miserable, what we call keitai in Japan, just kind of a phone, like an Ericsson, something like that. So it has a phone and it has email and a kind of internet, but the internet that was on the smartphone is not great at that time. And of course, he complained about the QWERTY keyboard, the plastic keyboard that was sort of at the bottom. So his point is here that it's not smart and they're not easy to use. And that's pretty easy to understand, of course, but let's visualize that. So he says, okay, he kind of laughs here. Let's pull up the Business 101 chart, which is really this sort of a positioning matrix that you're often used in business, in marketing. So he says here, regular cell phones that most people in the audience are using at that moment is down here. It's not smart, but it's pretty easy to use. On the other hand, there are some smartphones out there. They're not really smart, but they are definitely much smarter, but they're really difficult to use. That's a problem. So you can see where Apple's going to go, or where Steve's going to go in this case. It's sort of like a comedian who tells a really good story, a really good joke, and you kind of, the smart people in the audience will really kind of get the punchline just a moment before he says it. So obviously, that's where the iPhone's going to go. And the crowd goes crazy. They haven't seen the iPhone yet. They don't have any idea what it's going to be like. But he spoke in a way that's very clear. And this would be great if there was a really, really smartphone that was really, really easy to use. So his final slide there is then iPhone. That's the theme. Apple reinvents the phone. And then he goes on to the other section. But visually, over that 70 seconds, this is what it looked like, right? Lots of empty space. It's quite visual. There is it's not really a quantitative display, but there is this chart that's very simple. But if he didn't use that, it wouldn't have landed as well. So a lot of people might do something like this. I know this looks ridiculous, but I bet you still see presentations like this even in 2026, or something like this. Or something like this, where someone uses a laser pointer and going back and forth all over the place. I still see that, actually. I see that a lot in Japan. I don't know why you're using the laser pointer when you have a mountain of text there. But so I just took, in Keynote, I just made a little animated GIF out of Steve Jobs and a kind of a person presenting. And the old way, I don't think surely people would not do this in today's world. But what if you just introduced it in the old way with the lectern, standing behind the lectern and kind of going through things like this?
Do is make a leapfrog product that is way smarter than any mobile device has ever been and super easy to use. This is what iPhone is. Okay,
so obviously that would be ridiculous. So something like this, see how you can do that even in your technical presentations. Are there moments where you can try to have lots of empty space, including having the screen go completely blank where all the focus is on you? This is just another example. I'm not animating this, but this was really effective. It's a very simple bar chart, but at the time, although it's not a great bar chart, it's in 3D, so it's not the greatest, but it was quite dramatic. Just think of, well, what is the market for mobile phones compared to, game? We thought games are huge. Digital cameras must be huge. MP3 players must be huge, but they're nothing. PC sales, nothing compared to the potential of the mobile phone, which Apple saw is going to be the smartphones. Okay, so I often talk about, the downside of lots of bullet points and so on, but I didn't invent the idea. So here's are two books that I often recommend. I mean, John Sweller's book, the one I showed right at the beginning, is pretty expensive and it's a little bit dense. So you probably don't need all of that, but I recommend this one by Oliver Lavelle, which gets through the main points of it. And then, of course, the Richard Mayer's Multimedia Learning, which is really excellent. All right, thanks a lot. And try to remove as many bullet points as you can. Sometimes text, is inevitable, and sometimes bullet points make sense, of course, like summarizing some key points and things like that. But generally speaking, go back, look at your presentations and ask, well, what could I remove in terms of text that would make this more clear? And also, could I make the visuals bigger and easier to see? Keeping in mind that people really can't listen and read a bunch of text at the same time, but they can listen to you and look at any kind of visual at the same time. That makes sense. All right. Thanks very much.